Hello, everyone. Today I'll be walking you through one of the most significant corporate scandals in modern history, Volkswagen's Dieselgate. What makes this case so important isn't just the scale of the deception, but how deeply it tied together so many facets within the company and globally. My goal is to give you a clear story of what happened and what changed because of it. To start with the history, Volkswagen identity dates back to 1937 when Hitler's German government set out to build a simple, affordable Volkswagen, or people's car. Ferdinand Porsche was appointed as the chief designer, and the company's aim was to boost industrial employment after World War I, support modernization, and prepare for future conflict. During the war, VW produced various vehicles for the war effort, as seen in the picture in the upper middle. After World War II, the British military helped revive the company into a civilian manufacturer. That post war rebirth is what led to the modern Volkswagen brand we know today. From there, the company grew into one of the world's largest automakers, built on the promise of reliability, engineering excellence, and mass market appeal. By the mid 70s, Volkswagen hit global momentum with the launch of the VW Golf, or Rabbit as it was known in the US. It became one of the world's it became one of the most successful cars in history, selling over 35 million units. In the 2000s, VW pushed even harder for global dominance, acquiring luxury brands like Bentley, Lamborghini, and Bugatti, among others, while strengthening their subsidiary, Audi's position. But in the US, Volkswagen's focused on one core idea, and that was clean diesel. They believed diesel was the key to winning the American market, offering great mileage, strong performance, and lower emissions. At least, that's how it was marketed. Volkswagen's diesel lineup looked impressive on paper. Millions sold worldwide, with models like the Jetta, Beetle, Audi A3, Golf, and Passat all promoted as clean, efficient alternatives. But diesel engines run hotter than gasoline engines, and that heat produces pollutants called nitrogen oxides, or NOx, that are linked to asthma, respiratory issues, and cardiovascular problems. To meet U.S. emission standards, VW needed advanced after treatment systems, but those systems were expensive, reduced performance, and hurt fuel economy. So instead of solving the engineering problem, VW installed software known as a defeat device. More on this later, but this software recognized when the car was being tested and temporarily turned on fuel emission controls only during the test. On the road, those same cars emitted up to 40 times the legal limit of NOx. So, why did Volkswagen take such a massive risk? It came down to unrealistic expectations at the top. VW's leadership wanted to become the world's number one automaker, and success in the US was essential to that goal. Clean diesel became the centerpiece of their strategy, even though engineers repeatedly warned that meeting US NOx standards wasn't technologically possible without sacrificing cost, performance, and fuel economy. Leadership refused to adjust their plan. This created intense internal pressure, the kind where failure wasn't an option and bad news wasn't welcome. When the engineering reality clashed with the corporate dream, employees were pushed into a corner. Inside Volkswagen, the culture rewarded hitting targets, not honesty. Teams were discouraged from raising concerns, and a fear based environment drove employees to avoid delivering bad news at all costs. At this point, I believe this is a key characteristic of so many other companies that have been discussed during class, such as Enron, WorldCom, and I know some of my classmates' companies would also be similar as well. The emissions goals conflicted with cost goals, and both conflicted with performance expectations. So instead of reworking the strategy, the company simply hid the problem. The idea was that cheating would be temporary, a bridge until the technology caught up. But Volkswagen had already poured millions into the clean diesel marketing, and backing out would have been a public admission of failure. The longer they held on to the strategy, the deeper they sank. Now, here's what the defeat device actually did. During official testing, the car's wheels spin on a dyno while the vehicle itself stays stationary. Volkswagen software detected those exact conditions, which would be no steering input and steady wheel rotation, and switched the car into a special low emission mode. All emission controls were fully activated to appear compliant. But once the car sensed real world driving or steering, acceleration, or uneven motion, these controls switched off. The engine reverted to a powerful, fuel efficient tune, but one that emitted far more pollution. Inside the company, this was called an auxiliary emissions control device, a name chosen specifically to avoid scrutiny. And as a former mechanic, let me tell you, I would not have thought twice about replacing an auxiliary emissions control device. It sounds completely normal. A lot of auto manufacturers have similar names for various emission devices or exhaust systems or something like that. So it sounded completely normal. And Dieselgate wasn't just an engineering scandal, it was also a financial reporting scandal as well. While Volkswagen was hiding the defeat device, it also raised over $13 billion through stock sales and bond issuances, all without disclosing the massive regulatory risk it was sitting on. They hid billions in liabilities, underreported warranty and recall costs, and misclassified compliance expenses. The result was a balance sheet that looked stronger and far less risky than what should have been reported. In short, Volkswagen overstated assets, understated liabilities, and inflated revenues, which misled both regulators and investors. This isn't in the slides, but having taken previous classes, one could also say that they violated multiple layers of Carroll's corporate social responsibility hierarchy as well. Multiple high-level executives were implicated. Martin Winterkorn, the CEO, was indicted for conspiracy and wire fraud. Oliver Schmidt, a senior VW executive in the U.S., pleaded guilty and received a 7-year prison sentence. Rupert Stadler, the CEO of Audi, admitted wrongdoing in Germany, and others, including engineers like Jens Handler and Hanno Jelden, were convicted for their roles in developing and deploying the cheating software. Ultimately, Volkswagen, the company, pleaded guilty to felony charges and paid over $33 billion in global fines and settlements. Volkswagen worked hard to keep the truth hidden. They misled regulators for more than 16 months, providing incomplete explanations and releasing fake software updates that pretended to fix the issue while keeping the defeat device in place. They restricted knowledge to a small circle, labeled labeled the device as a legitimate system, and even destroyed documents when investigations began. Publicly, Volkswagen continued promoting clean diesel as if nothing was wrong. Internally, they withheld key risk information from auditors and investors. The truth came out because independent researchers at West Virginia University stated that Volkswagen diesel cars tested, the truth came out because the fine folks at West Virginia University tested the Volkswagen diesel cars on real roads and not just in the labs. So the two pictures on the bottom left here, that is your lab testing on a dyno. It's very stationary. They take a lot of precautions to make sure driving at high speeds or whatnot that the car doesn't come off those drums that are spinning underneath the car. But anyway, the West Virginia University researchers discovered enormous gaps between lab results and real-world emissions. The ICCT verified the findings, and regulators began pressing Volkswagen for answers. For over a year, Volkswagen stalled with misleading explanations, but by late 2015, confronted with new data, engineers finally admitted what had been happening. On September 18, 2015, the EPA issued a notice of violation. Volkswagen publicly confessed that 11 million vehicles worldwide had been deliberately equipped with defeat devices. Before Dieselgate, several laws already existed to prevent this exact type of behavior. The U.S. Clean Air Act prohibited tampering with emissions controls, and both the EPA and California Resources Board required automakers to certify emission systems accurately. On the financial side, the Securities and Exchange Act of 1934 and the SEC Rule 10b-5 prohibited misleading investors. Under international financial reporting standards, VW should have reported the risks, impaired assets, and included material information in its financial statements, otherwise known as the balance sheet. In other words, the laws were there, Volkswagen simply chose to ignore them. After Dieselgate, regulators worldwide strengthened oversight. The EU introduced the real driving's emission testing, meaning vehicles are tested with portable equipment under real world conditions, much like what West Virginia University had been doing. The EU Commission gained authority to retest cars, audit manufacturers, issue recalls, and impose fines. In the US, the EPA expanded on road testing and software monitoring, using its existing authority under the Clean Air Act to tighten enforcement dramatically. The era of relying solely on lab based emission tests was over. And then to summarize, Volkswagen installed software to cheat emissions tests because they couldn't meet US standards without sacrificing the performance and fuel economy that they were selling to consumers. A toxic internal culture, unrealistic goals, and a refusal to accept engineering reality drove leadership toward deception. Independent researchers uncovered the truth, regulators forced disclosure, and Volkswagen ultimately faced more than $33 billion in penalties. Not to mention, if you go back a couple slides, that is actually a picture from Yahoo Finance of Volkswagen's stock price. And you can see in 2015 where it had a dramatic fall after all of this kind of came out. It kind of held steadily. They came out with a new car and their stock price rose. And then all these settlements finally came to a head in 2021 kind of time frame. And you can see where the stock price decreases again dramatically and is still held fairly low. But anyway, Dieselgate remains a defining case of corporate misconduct and one that has reshaped industry standards and regulatory enforcement around the world. And lastly, my opinion and recommendations, kind of stepping beyond the facts here. I believe that Dieselgate especially shows exactly what happens when culture, incentives, and leadership drift away from transparency. And then no amount of engineering talent or financial strength can compensate for a system that rewards results at any cost. I mean, we've seen this in Enron, WorldCom, and so many other companies that follow kind of this same path. If I were a consultant advising Volkswagen in this aftermath, I would imagine they're probably already doing this, but I would have 4 recommendations probably. First off is definitely a restructure of their incentives. Secondly, strengthen whistleblower protections. So, maybe one of the engineers, if they weren't so afraid of losing their job or being shamed or something like that, maybe would have came forward a little sooner than they had. And then thirdly, they need to, rebuild public trust. You can see that their stock still isn't doing well in 2025. This is almost 10 years after Dieselgate had kind of come out into the mainstream. And what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to, be fully transparent, have probably some third-party testing and independent audits, honestly, just to really try to regain the public and the global trust in their brand and their company. Fourth, just the evaluation of strategic goals. Like, yes, you want to shoot the bar high. Yes, you want to be the number one global car manufacturer, but at all costs is a little crazy. So they want to have achievable goals, but again, like Carol's corporate social responsibility, like they can't compromise ethics for their economic goals. And then in closing, Dieselgate wasn't just a failure of engineering, it was a failure of leadership, culture, and accountability. And for companies today, it serves as a powerful reminder that the cost of hiding the truth will always be higher than the cost of admitting it. Thank you. Lastly, these are my resources here. I couldn't get the formatting into Canva, so I just copy and pasted from my Word document. So I hope that is okay. And that is it. Have a blessed holiday season. Thank you very much. The class has been very enjoyable. Thank you both. I look forward to hopefully seeing you in the new year. All right.